I'm Alexandra Mitchell, 32, standing frozen on the marble stage of my father's obscenely extravagant $2 million company anniversary party. And this, my father announces, gesturing dismissively toward me, is my useless daughter who couldn't be bothered to contribute to our family legacy. The crowd's uncomfortable silence cuts deeper than his words. My hands tremble, but my mind is suddenly, unexpectedly calm. I step forward, taking the microphone from his manicured hands. What my father didn't know was that for 3 years, I had been secretly acquiring shares in his precious company. Before I dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been underestimated by someone who should have believed in you. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how this family power play unfolds. Growing up as Alexandra Mitchell meant living in the shadow of expectations I could never quite reach. From my earliest memories, my father, Robert, made it abundantly clear that Mitchell Enterprises was the center of our universe, our family legacy, our identity, and apparently, the only measure of our worth. Your brother understands what matters, Dad would say at dinner, while 12-year-old James basked in the praise for showing interest in quarterly reports that he barely understood. Meanwhile, my straight-A report card sat unacknowledged beside my plate. This wasn't an unusual occurrence. It was the established rhythm of our family dynamic. Our sprawling Connecticut estate housed 4 people who functioned more like business associates than family. Dad, the CEO in every setting, was a man whose approval was a currency more valuable than the millions he amassed. Mom, Caroline, moved through our home like a beautiful ghost, having learned decades ago that keeping peace meant validating Robert's perspective, no matter the cost to her children. Alexandra, dear, she would whisper when Dad stormed out after one of our arguments. He just wants what's best for the family. The company is his life's work. Her perfectly manicured hand would pat mine, but her eyes never quite met mine during these moments of half-hearted consolation. Then there was James. My complicated relationship with my brother shifted like quicksand throughout our lives. Sometimes my defender, Dad, Alex got into Yale. Can we acknowledge that for 5 seconds? Sometimes my competitor. Well, Alex might have graduated with honors, but she's still refusing to join the family business where it actually matters. I never wanted to take the path my father had paved with his expectations. While James followed the predetermined route, Wharton Business School, summer internships at Mitchell Enterprises, then directly to a VP position, nobody dared question I chose Stanford, then earned my MBA from Harvard. My father's response to my Harvard acceptance? Shame, you're wasting a perfectly good education on somebody else's company. After graduation, I took a position at Barrett International, one of our industry competitors. Not to spite him, though he certainly took it that way, but because I wanted to prove myself on my own merits. I rose quickly through their ranks, developing a reputation for innovative strategies and ethical leadership qualities that went unnoticed at our family dinner table. Those Sunday dinners remained a special kind of torture well into my adult years. James closed the Singapore deal, Dad would announce, raising his crystal glass of bourbon, 50 million, in new business. Everyone would turn to James, who at least had the decency to look slightly embarrassed by the display. What about you, Alexandra? Dad would eventually ask, though his tone made it clear my answer was merely a formality. Still pushing papers at Barrett. The fact that I'd just led a $30 million expansion project, or restructured an entire division to increase efficiency by 40% didn't register. In the Mitchell family, success only counted if it directly benefited Mitchell Enterprises. One particular memory stands out from when I was 16. I'd won a national economics competition, beating out students from across the country with my analysis of emerging market trends. The principal called our home personally to congratulate my parents. That's nice, Dad said when I excitedly told him. Then, without missing a beat, James just got invited to sit in on his first board meeting. That's going to matter in the real world. I kept that trophy hidden in my closet, rather than displayed on our family's achievement shelf, which was crowded with James accolades and my father's industry awards. That night, I made a promise to myself. Someday, I would force Robert Mitchell to see my value, even if it meant redefining his entire value system. Despite everything, I maintained my relationship with my family, calling my mother weekly, meeting James for occasional lunches, and enduring the Sunday dinners when I was in town. The emotional toll was significant, but they were my family. I always held on to the hope that someday, something would change. What I didn't realize then was that I would be the catalyst for that change, and that it would begin not with seeking my father's approval, but by understanding the true nature of the company, head placed above his relationship with his daughter. The first crack in my father's carefully constructed facade appeared during an industry conference in Chicago 3 years ago. I was representing Barrett International, delivering a presentation on sustainable supply chain management, when I noticed Diane Blackwell, CFO of a major investment firm, watching me intently from the third row. "You're Robert Mitchell's daughter," she said afterward, extending her hand. I almost didn't make the connection. "You look like him, but your presentation style is completely different, more substantive." I thanked her for the backhanded compliment, ready to move on, when she added, "You might want to keep an eye on your family business. There are some concerning whispers in certain circles." My professional poker face remained intact, but internally, my pulse quickened. What kind of whispers? Diane glanced around before lowering her voice. Overextension, risky acquisitions, liquidity concerns. Nothing concrete enough for the financial pages yet, but enough that some of us are reducing exposure to Mitchell Enterprises in our portfolios. I dismissed her comments initially. My father was many things: cold, judgmental, obsessed with appearances, but he was also a shrewd businessman. Mitchell Enterprises had been his single-minded focus for 30 years. He wouldn't make amateur mistakes with his precious company. 2 weeks later, I received a LinkedIn message from a name I recognized from my childhood. Martin Wells. He had been my father's business partner during the early years of Mitchell Enterprises. I remembered him bringing me model airplanes when he visited our house, letting me play with his tie clips while the adults talked business. Then one day, he simply disappeared from our lives. "Alexandra," his message read. "I've been following your career from afar. Very impressive. I wonder if you might be willing to meet for coffee next time you're in Boston? There are some things about your family's history you might want to know." Curiosity got the better of me. The following week, I sat across from Martin in a quiet corner of a Boston cafe. He had aged, his once dark hair now silver, but his eyes still held the kindness I remembered. "Your father pushed me out 17 years ago," he said without preamble. "We built that company together, but when it came time for our first major expansion, he fabricated financial discrepancies, claimed I had been skimming from accounts. By the time I cleared my name, he had leveraged my shares away from me and established himself as the sole visionary behind Mitchell Enterprises." "That doesn't sound like legal business practice," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I recognized the hollow defense. It sounded exactly like my father. Martin's smile held no humor. "It wasn't, but your father has always excelled at operating in gray areas, while maintaining a spotless public image. I considered legal action, but he made it clear he would drag it out until I was bankrupt. I had 2 kids in college. I couldn't take the risk. Why tell me this now? Because history repeats itself, Alexandra. Robert hasn't changed his tactics, just his targets. I still have contacts in the industry. Has making increasingly risky moves to expand market share, leveraging company assets in ways that would terrify shareholders if they understood the details." I left that meeting shaken, Martin's business card burning a hole in my pocket. That night, I began my research. I called in favors from business school friends now working in financial analysis. I discreetly reached out to former Mitchell Enterprises employees who had left under questionable circumstances. I studied the company's public filings with newly skeptical eyes. A disturbing pattern emerged. My father's recent business decisions showed a desperate grab for growth at any cost over leveraging, cutting corners on compliance, acquiring companies with questionable assets but impressive-looking portfolios. The final confirmation came from an unexpected source, James. During one of our rare sibling dinners, after his third scotch, my brother's perfect, loyal son facade cracked. "Dad's making me nervous," he confessed, staring into his glass. He overruled the entire risk management team on the Apex acquisition. The numbers didn't add up, but he insisted it would transform our market position. Now we're stuck with their liabilities, and he's acting like it's all part of some master plan. "Have you confronted him?" I asked, already knowing the answer. James gave a hollow laugh. "You know, Dad, questioning his business acumen is like questioning the law of gravity." He said I lacked vision, that I needed to think bigger if I ever hoped to fill his shoes. My brother looked genuinely troubled. "But I've seen the projections, Alex. If 3 of our major bets don't pay off exactly as he's gambling they will, we're in serious trouble." That night, lying awake in my apartment, I confronted an uncomfortable truth. My father valued Mitchell Enterprises above everything, above ethical business practices, above financial stability, and certainly above family relationships. The company wasn't just his legacy, it was his identity, his justification for every personal failing. More disturbing was the realization that he would sacrifice anything to maintain control of that company, including its long-term health. My father wasn't a business genius playing three-dimensional chess. He was a narcissist who couldn't admit he was no longer infallible. The next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to Rachel Thompson, a financial advisor I'd met during my MBA program, who now specialized in discrete investment strategies for high-net-worth clients. The second was to Martin Wells. "I need to understand something," I said when Martin answered. "If someone wanted to acquire a significant ownership position in Mitchell Enterprises without alerting current leadership, would it be possible?" His pause spoke volumes. "The company went public 10 years ago, though your father maintained majority control. But there's a percentage of freely trading shares, plus several original investors who've held their positions since the early days." "Why do you ask?" "Because I'm starting to think the only way to save Mitchell Enterprises might be to gain enough influence to check my father's worst impulses. That would take serious capital, Alexandra, and your father would view it as the ultimate betrayal." I thought about years of Sunday dinners, of achievements dismissed, of being called the useless daughter who contributed nothing of value. "You can't betray someone who never trusted you in the first place," I replied. "Send me everything you know about the current shareholder structure. I have some planning to do." That afternoon, I discovered something interesting. Approximately 22% of Mitchell Enterprises stock was held by minor shareholders, people, and entities my father likely considered too insignificant to monitor closely. If I could somehow acquire those shares, combined with strategic purchases on the open market, I could potentially become the second largest shareholder in my father's company. Not enough to control it, but enough to have a voice he couldn't ignore. I withdrew half my savings that day and opened a new investment account. The seeds of what my father would eventually call betrayal were planted, though in my mind, I was attempting a rescue mission that might save both the company and, just possibly, our family. Rachel Thompson's office overlooked Boston Harbor, the water glittering like the possibilities she laid out before me. "If you're serious about this, Alexandra, we need to move methodically," she said, her fingers flying over her keyboard. "Your father is nothing if not vigilant about who owns pieces of his company." "I'm serious," I confirmed. "What's the first step?" Rachel pushed her glasses up her nose. "We create a shell corporation, several, actually. Mitchell will be monitoring for your name specifically, so we need to ensure there's no direct connection between you and any share purchases. Over the next 6 months, we established 3 separate LLCs in different states, each with generic names and managed by trusted associates. Through these entities, I began purchasing small blocks of Mitchell Enterprises stock whenever they became available on the open market. The process was agonizingly slow. To avoid triggering reporting requirements or price spikes that would draw attention, each purchase needed to be modest. Meanwhile, I maintained my position at Barrett International, even accepting a promotion that ironically gave me deeper insight into industry trends affecting my father's company. 7%, Rachel reported after our first year of acquisitions. "It's a start, but not enough to matter in a shareholder vote." That's when I decided to take a more aggressive approach. Martin Wells had mentioned original investors who still held shares. Using his connections and a carefully crafted story about representing an investment collective interested in Mitchell Enterprises' long-term stability, I arranged meetings with several of these shareholders. Harold Brenner, a retired venture capitalist who had backed my father's earliest efforts, invited me to his home in Martha's Vineyard. I arrived using my middle name, Drew, presenting myself as a financial consultant. "Mitchell's a brilliant businessman," Harold mused as we sat on his deck overlooking the Atlantic. "But I've been concerned about some of the recent strategic decisions. Too much risk for a company that size. My clients feel the same way," I replied carefully. "They believe in the company's fundamental value but question the current leadership's approach to growth." Harold studied me over his reading glasses. "And your clients would pursue a more conservative strategy. They would prioritize sustainable growth over headline-grabbing acquisitions," I confirmed. "The goal would be stability and long-term value creation." By the end of our meeting, Harold agreed to sell his entire 4% stake to my investment collective. 3 similar meetings yielded another 7% of the company. Combined with our open market purchases, I now controlled nearly 18% of Mitchell Enterprises, all hidden behind a complex web of holding companies and investment vehicles. The strain of this double life was considerable. Every family gathering became an exercise in composure. During one Sunday dinner, my father complained bitterly about activist investors asking uncomfortable questions during the most recent shareholder meeting. Some consultant representing a new group of shareholders had the audacity to question our acquisition strategy, he fumed, stabbing at his roast beef. These people buy a few shares and suddenly think they understand the vision that built this company. I took a careful sip of wine, my face neutral. Perhaps they're just concerned about protecting their investment. My father snorted. What they should be concerned about is staying out of my way. Mitchell Enterprises didn't become an industry leader by committee decisions. James caught my eye across the table, his expression unreadable. Later, as we helped our mother clear the dishes, he pulled me aside. You seem different lately, he observed. More confident? Even when Dad goes on his rants. I shrugged. Maybe I've just stopped needing his approval. My brother studied me for a moment longer before nodding slowly. Whatever it is, it looks good on you. There were close calls. When Mitchell Enterprises' stock price unexpectedly dropped following a disappointing quarterly report, I instructed Rachel to increase our purchasing activity. The sudden uptick in trading volume prompted a company investigation into potential market manipulation. They're looking for patterns in the recent stock purchases. Rachel warned during an encrypted call, we need to pause all acquisition activity for at least 30 days. Those 30 days were excruciating. I worried constantly that my father would somehow trace the purchases back to me. I jumped whenever my phone rang with his number, convinced he'd discovered my scheme. But Robert Mitchell's blind spot had always been his inability to see his daughter as a worthy opponent. When the investigation concluded that the trading patterns showed no evidence of coordinated manipulation, we resumed our careful accumulation strategy with renewed caution. By the beginning of the third year, I had reached 25% ownership, a critical threshold that would require the company to at least consider my input on major decisions, if they knew who I was. I began attending industry events where Mitchell Enterprises executives would be present, careful to maintain my cover but listening intently to company gossip. At one such conference, I overheard Mitchell's CTO complaining about my father's refusal to invest in necessary technology upgrades. The old man thinks our current systems are good enough. He doesn't understand we're falling years behind the competition. These conversations confirmed what the financial data suggested. My father's leadership was increasingly detrimental to the company's future. Yet I still hesitated to reveal my position. What was I waiting for? The perfect moment? Enough shares to single-handedly override his decisions? Or was I simply afraid to finally, irreversibly cross the line from dutiful daughter to business adversary? The decision was made for me when Rachel called with unexpected news. A significant block of shares just came on the market, nearly 6%, held by the Franklin estate. Their financial advisor is quietly looking for a buyer before announcing publicly. What's the asking price? I asked, already calculating whether I could afford it. Above market value, but not unreasonable given what it represents. This would put you at 31%, Alexandra. You'd be the second largest shareholder after your father. I closed my eyes, seeing the path before me with sudden clarity. Make the offer. It's time. 2 days later, the transaction was complete. I now owned nearly 1/3 of Mitchell Enterprises, enough to demand attention, force votes on key issues, and potentially ally with other shareholders to check my father's worst impulses. That same afternoon, the invitation arrived in my inbox. Mitchell Enterprises' 30th anniversary celebration. A $2 million extravaganza my father had been planning for months. The perfect stage for a family reckoning that was 30 years in the making. The invitation glowed on my phone screen, its gold and black design as ostentatious as everything else associated with my father. Mitchell Enterprises celebrates 30 years of excellence, it proclaimed. Join Robert Mitchell and the Mitchell family for an evening of celebration and vision casting. My thumb hovered over the decline button. After 3 years of secret share acquisitions, did I really want to reveal my position at what was essentially my father's monument to himself? The guest list would include every industry heavyweight, board member, and significant employee. The business press would be there. The potential for public humiliation, both his and mine, was enormous. My phone rang. Mom. Alexandra. Please tell me you're coming to the anniversary celebration, she said without preamble. Your father is announcing some major company changes, and it would look terrible if his own daughter wasn't there to support the family. What kind of changes? I asked carefully. He hasn't shared the details, but he's been meeting with the board for weeks. It's important, dear. Family appearances matter. Family appearances, not family relationships or genuine connections, just the appearance of familial unity for the Mitchell brand. Even after 30 years, my mother remained the keeper of my father's image. "I'll think about it," I replied noncommittally. No sooner had I ended that call when another came through. "James, tell me you're coming to this ridiculous party," my brother said, sounding uncharacteristically agitated. "Why?" "So Dad can remind everyone how useless I am while celebrating himself." James was quiet for a moment. "Alex has announcing my appointment as president and CEO in waiting. Has finally stepping into a chairman role." The implications hit me immediately. Dad was consolidating his power through James, ensuring the company remained under his control even as he created the appearance of succession planning. "And you're okay with being his puppet?" I asked. "It's not like that," James protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Look, we both know he'll never truly relinquish control while he's breathing, but at least this way I have some influence. Maybe I can moderate some of his riskier impulses. Or maybe you'll be his scapegoat when those risky strategies fail," I countered. "James, you've seen the quarterly reports. The company is over-leveraged. The Apex acquisition was a disaster. 3 major clients are on the verge of jumping ship, which is exactly why you need to be there," he pressed. "I need at least one person in that room who understands what I'm walking into. Please, Alex." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, staring at the invitation. This wasn't how I'd planned to reveal my ownership stake. It imagined a private meeting, perhaps with keyboard members present, where I could calmly present my concerns and my credentials. But maybe this public spectacle was the only way to break through my father's armor. He had spent decades dismissing me in private. Perhaps what was needed was a public challenge he couldn't simply walk away from. I tapped accept on the invitation, then immediately called Rachel. "I need everything ready for the Mitchell anniversary event," I told her. "Full documentation of my ownership position, analysis of the company's vulnerabilities, and briefing papers on each board member. Next, I contacted my attorney, Vanessa Keating. I need you to verify the legality of my share acquisitions," I explained. "Multiple reviews, ironclad confirmation that every purchase was above board." "Planning a hostile takeover?" she asked, only half joking. "Planning to save a company from its founder," I corrected, "and potentially my family in the process." For the next 3 weeks, I prepared meticulously. While maintaining my role at Barrett International, I spent evenings analyzing Mitchell Enterprises' business operations, identifying critical weaknesses in my father's strategy, and developing alternative approaches. I rehearsed what I would say, practicing in front of my bathroom mirror, until the words flowed naturally, without emotion overtaking message. "I'm not here to destroy what you've built, Dad. I'm here to preserve it, even if that means protecting it from you." The night before the event, I visited my best friend Lily for a final pep talk. We'd been inseparable since our undergraduate days, and she was the only person besides Rachel and my attorney who knew the full extent of my plans. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" she asked, pouring us both a glass of wine. "Once you do this, your relationship with your father may never recover." I laughed, though there was little humor in it. "What relationship?" "Hez spent my entire life making it clear, I'm a disappointment. At least tomorrow, he'll finally have to acknowledge my existence." Lily took my hand. "Just remember why you're doing this. This isn't about revenge. It's about protecting the company, its employees, and yes, even your family from Robert's increasingly risky decisions." I nodded, grateful for the reminder. "It's not personal," I agreed, "even though it's going to feel incredibly personal to him." "Wear something intimidating," Lily advised as I left. "Something that says, 'Underestimate me at your peril.'" The morning of the celebration, I selected a tailored black suit with subtle power shoulders, paired with a crimson blouse Mitchell Enterprises' signature color. I arranged my hair in a sleek chignon, and applied makeup that emphasized my resemblance to my father, the strong jawline, the penetrating eyes that could make subordinates squirm. As my car approached the venue, a historic downtown hotel my father had rented in its entirety for the evening, I took a final moment to center myself. In my briefcase were the documents proving my 31% ownership stake, my attorney's confirmation of their legitimacy, and my detailed analysis of the company's current vulnerabilities. 3 years of careful planning had led to this moment. I was no longer the useless daughter seeking approval. I was Alexandra Mitchell, major shareholder and business strategist, about to reclaim both my place in the company and my dignity in the family. As I stepped from the car, I spotted Martin Wells waiting discreetly by a side entrance, as we'd arranged. He would be my unexpected ally in the room, confirming the historical context of my father's business practices if needed. "Are you ready for this?" he asked quietly. I nodded, surprising myself with my calm certainty. I've been ready for this my entire life. The grand ballroom of the Wentworth Hotel had been transformed into a shrine to Mitchell Enterprises. Massive ice sculptures shaped like the company logo gleamed under custom lighting. Video walls displayed 30 years of company milestones, carefully edited to feature Robert Mitchell at the center of every significant achievement. A 20-piece orchestra played subtly in the background as waitstaff in tailored uniforms offered champagne from trays bearing the Mitchell M. $2 million well spent. I muttered to myself, accepting a glass of champagne I had no intention of drinking. Clear-headedness would be essential tonight. As I moved through the growing crowd, I noticed several Barrett International clients doing double takes upon recognizing me. Frank Lassiter, CEO of Meridian Systems, approached with confusion written across his face. "Alexandra? I didn't expect to see you here. Isn't this your competitor's celebration?" I smiled professionally. "Family obligation. Robert Mitchell is my father." Frank's eyebrows shot up. "I had no idea. You've never mentioned the connection in our meetings. I prefer to succeed on my own merits." I replied simply. Before he could respond, my father's longtime assistant Patricia appeared at my elbow. "Alexandra, your family is gathering for photos before the main reception. Your father wants the Mitchell family presented as a united front." Of course he did. Image above substance, as always. The family photo session was predictably tense. My mother fussed with my collar, whispering, "Couldn't you have worn something more festive? This looks like business attire." "That's because I'm here on business," I responded quietly, earning a sharp look from Dad, who was positioning James exactly 2 inches to his right, the heir apparent's designated spot. "Alexandra, try to look like you want to be here," my father directed, as the photographer prepared to shoot. "This is a celebration, not a funeral." I smiled with practiced precision, the same smile I used in board meetings when hearing proposals I intended to dismantle. "I'm exactly where I need to be tonight, Dad." After photos, we dispersed to mingle with arriving guests. I circulated strategically, engaging board members in conversations about industry trends, careful to avoid revealing my detailed knowledge of Mitchell Enterprises' specific challenges. Walter Grange, the longest-serving board member and my father's golf partner, seemed particularly surprised by my industry insights. "You've certainly been keeping up with the sector despite working for Barrett," he commented. "Robert rarely mentions your accomplishments." "My father and I have different definitions of achievement," I replied diplomatically. "Tell me, Walter, what's your take on the Apex integration issues? I hear there have been some unexpected challenges." Walter's expression tightened. "You seem remarkably well informed about internal Mitchell matters." I shrugged casually. "The industry talks. Barrett has been watching the acquisition with interest." Before Walter could press further, my mother appeared, smoothly steering me toward a group of family friends and away from business conversations. "Alexandra, come say hello to the Whitmores. They've been asking about you." For the next hour, I allowed myself to be guided through superficial social interactions, all while observing the room carefully. The crowd was impressive industry leaders, political figures, media representatives. My father had spared no expense to ensure his celebration would be remembered as the business event of the year. Through it all, I watched my father work the room with practiced charm, a skill he had always deployed effectively in public, while reserving his cutting judgments for private. He moved from group to group, a benevolent patriarch accepting congratulations as his due, occasionally drawing James forward to introduce him to particularly important contacts. Not once did he glance in my direction or attempt to include me in these strategic conversations. In his narrative, I remained the irrelevant daughter, present only to maintain the facade of family unity. Near the bar, I overheard 2 board members in concerned conversation. "The Liberty contract renewal is looking shaky," the first said quietly. "They're balking at the new terms. Robert insists they have no choice but to stay with us, but their CFO was at the Henderson conference last month, actively meeting with competitors." I filed this information away. Liberty was Mitchell's second-largest client. Losing them would be devastating to next quarter's projections. As I turned away, I nearly collided with James, who had approached silently behind me. "You're making the board nervous," he murmured, guiding me toward a quieter corner. "Walter asked Dad if you were gathering competitive intelligence." "And what did our father say?" Jameis' mouth quirked. "That you wouldn't know valuable intelligence if it came with a user manual." His exact words. Despite everything, that stung. Some things never change, I observed. "Are you planning something tonight?" James asked directly. "You have that look." "What look?" "The same look you had before you corrected Professor Harrington's economic theory in front of the entire class at Yale. Determined. A little dangerous." I smiled. "I'm just here to support the family, as requested." James studied me, unconvinced. "Whatever you're planning, just be careful. Dad is in rare form tonight. I've never seen him this focused on creating the perfect narrative." "The perfect narrative for your coronation, you mean?" My brother flinched slightly. "It's not like that. I've worked hard at Mitchell for years while you chose to build your career elsewhere. This succession plan makes sense." "Does it make sense that the company is overextended on 3 continents? That the Apex acquisition has created a financial sinkhole? That Dad overruled the entire risk management team on the Singapore expansion?" James paled. "How do you know about Singapore?" "That decision was made in a closed board session 2 weeks ago." Before I could respond, a ripple of movement passed through the crowd as my father approached the stage. The orchestra faded, spotlights activated, and the video walls shifted to a single massive Mitchell Enterprises logo. "Showtime," I murmured, more to myself than James. As my father tapped the microphone, I noticed a latecomer slipping into the ballroom. Martin Wells positioned himself near a service entrance, catching my eye with a subtle nod. Everything was in place. My father's voice boomed through the ballroom. "Friends, colleagues, distinguished guests, welcome to an evening 30 years in the making." The crowd applauded enthusiastically as the next phase of the celebration and confrontation began. "When I founded Mitchell Enterprises 3 decades ago," my father began, his commanding voice filling the ballroom, "I had nothing but a vision and the determination to make it reality. Many said it couldn't be done. Many obstacles stood in my way." He paused dramatically. "But as everyone in this room knows, obstacles are just opportunities for greatness in disguise." The crowd responded with appreciative laughter and applause. My father basked in it momentarily before continuing, his perfectly tailored tuxedo catching the spotlight as he gestured expansively. "Building this company required sacrifice, commitment, unwavering focus, but I didn't do it alone." Another strategic pause. "I want to recognize those who have been instrumental in making Mitchell Enterprises the industry leader it is today." What followed was a carefully choreographed sequence of acknowledgments. Board members, key executives, early investors, though notably, not Martin Wells, whose contribution to founding the company had been systematically erased from the official history. "And of course," my father continued, his voice warming with practiced sincerity, "none of this would have been possible without the support of my family." He beckoned my mother to join him on stage. Caroline Mitchell ascended gracefully, the perfect corporate wife in her designer gown, her smile fixed and flawless as she took her place beside her husband. "My wife, Caroline, has been my partner through every challenge, every victory. Her strength and wisdom have been my foundation." My mother's smile never wavered, though I knew the reality of their relationship included years of her opinions being dismissed and her concerns overruled. In public, however, they maintained the illusion of the perfect power couple, and my son, James. My father's voice swelled with unmistakable pride as he motioned James forward. From the moment he joined Mitchell Enterprises, James has proven himself a true Mitchell. His strategic insight, leadership capabilities, and dedication to our company's vision represent everything this family stands for. James joined them on stage, looking simultaneously proud and uncomfortable as our father placed a hand on his shoulder. James has earned his place in this company through merit, through results, through commitment. Today, I'm proud to announce that the board has unanimously approved James' appointment as president and CEO in waiting of Mitchell Enterprises, effective immediately. The ballroom erupted in applause. James shook our father's hand formally, then embraced him in what photographers would capture as a perfect moment of succession, father and son, the Mitchell legacy secured. I waited for my name to be mentioned, some perfunctory acknowledgement of my existence. The silence stretched as my father continued praising James' accomplishments. Then, almost as an afterthought, my father glanced in my direction. "And of course, my other child is here tonight as well." The spotlight swung awkwardly to find me in the crowd. I straightened my spine, maintaining my composure as hundreds of eyes turned in my direction. Alexandra chose a different path. My father continued, his tone shifting subtly. While James committed himself to building our family legacy, Alexandra decided her talents would be better applied elsewhere. An uncomfortable ripple moved through the audience. My father's implication was clear to everyone. Some might call it ironic that my daughter works for a competitor, given all the opportunities Mitchell Enterprises could have provided. He smiled tightly, but I suppose every family needs its rebel. Scattered nervous laughter followed. I maintained direct eye contact with my father, refusing to look away or show any reaction. Despite what some might consider a wasted education and a disappointing lack of business acumen when it comes to recognizing real opportunity, Alexandra has managed to establish herself adequately in her chosen field. The room had grown uncomfortably quiet. Even those who thrived on corporate drama seemed embarrassed by this public dressing down. Nevertheless, family is family. My father concluded magnanimously. So please, join me in acknowledging my daughter, Alexandra, who has at least made the effort to be present tonight to support her brother's achievement. Scattered, reluctant applause followed. From the corner of my eye, I could see James looking mortified. My mother's smile frozen in place. Board members shifted awkwardly, unsure how to react to this unexpected family drama unfolding during what was supposed to be a celebration. My face flushed with heat, but my mind remained surprisingly clear. This was nothing new, just the public version of what I'd experienced privately for decades. The dismissal, the backhanded compliments, the implication that any success I achieved was somehow lesser because it didn't directly benefit Mitchell Enterprises. My father, apparently satisfied with his public reminder of my failings, returned to his prepared remarks. As we look to the future of Mitchell Enterprises, I'm proud to announce several strategic initiatives that will ensure our continued dominance for decades to come. He launched into details of expansion plans, acquisitions, and market projections that I knew from my research were dangerously optimistic at best, deliberately misleading at worst. From across the room, I caught Martinwell's eye. He gave a slight nod, our prearranged signal. I returned it imperceptibly, confirming I was proceeding as planned. I felt someone touch my elbow and turned to find my mother, who had slipped from the stage while my father continued his speech. "Alexandra, please," she whispered urgently. "Just let it go. You know how important tonight is to your father." "Yes, I do know," I replied quietly. "That's precisely why this can't wait." On stage, my father was reaching his grand conclusion. And so, as Mitchell Enterprises enters its fourth decade, we do so from a position of unprecedented strength, unmatched innovation, and unparalleled leadership. With James soon taking the operational reins and myself focusing on strategic direction as chairman, there is literally nothing that can stand in our way. Enthusiastic applause filled the ballroom as my father raised his champagne glass in a toast. To Mitchell Enterprises, to the future. The crowd echoed his toast, glasses rising throughout the room. My father turned to embrace James once more for the cameras, a victory lap before the celebratory dinner was served. It was at that precise moment that I began making my way toward the stage. I moved deliberately through the crowd, maintaining eye contact with the stage. Conversations quieted as I passed, the ripple of silence following me creating a path toward my father and brother. By the time I reached the steps to the platform, a hush had fallen over the nearest tables. My father was still basking in the applause, his back half turned to me as he spoke quietly to James. It was James who noticed me first, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. He touched our father's arm in warning just as I reached the top step. "Alexandra," my father said, not bothering to mask his irritation at this deviation from the program. "The family photo opportunity has concluded. The servers are about to bring out dinner. I'd like to say a few words, Dad," I replied, my voice steady and carrying across the now attentive room. His smile tightened. "This isn't the time for impromptu speeches. We have a schedule to maintain." I stepped forward anyway, extending my hand toward the microphone he still held. "It will just take a moment." A flash of genuine anger crossed his face, quickly controlled as he remembered the audience. "Always the rebel," he said with a forced chuckle for the benefit of those watching. "Perhaps after dinner, if there's time." Instead of retreating, I turned directly to the audience. "For those who don't know me, I'm Alexandra Mitchell." My voice projected clearly without the microphone. And while my father suggests I've contributed nothing to Mitchell Enterprises, I'd like to offer a slightly different perspective. The crowd's attention sharpened. My father's hand closed around my upper arm, his grip tight but his smile still fixed in place. Alexandra, this is neither the time nor the place. Actually, Dad, this is exactly the right time and place. I replied, gently but firmly removing his hand from my arm. I turned back to the audience. For the past 3 years, I've been working as a consultant for several of Mitchell Enterprises' largest clients. A murmur ran through the crowd. I could see board members exchanging concerned glances. Not through Barrett International, I clarified, but through an independent advisory firm, specializing in operational efficiency and sustainable growth strategies. My father attempted to reclaim control, reaching again for the microphone. My daughter has apparently prepared some remarks. However, dinner is waiting. And what my father doesn't want me to tell you, I continued, stepping away from his reach, is that Mitchell Enterprises is facing significant challenges that tonight's celebration conveniently obscures. The room went absolutely silent. Even the servers paused in their movements. The Apex acquisition that was celebrated as visionary leadership? It's hemorrhaging money due to unaddressed integration issues. The Singapore expansion my father just referenced? It violates 3 separate risk management protocols the board established last year. The Liberty contract renewal he's counting on for next quarter's projections? Liberty's executives are actively meeting with competitors. Board members were now sitting up straight, their expressions a mixture of shock and growing concern. My father's face had drained of color, his legendary composure cracking. Alexandra, that's enough, he hissed. You're embarrassing yourself with information you couldn't possibly have. Oh, I have the information, Dad, I replied calmly. In fact, I probably know more about the current state of Mitchell Enterprises than anyone in this room except you. I paused, meeting his gaze directly. Because for the past 3 years, I've been acquiring shares in the company. As of last week, I own 31% of Mitchell Enterprises. The ballroom erupted in shocked exclamations. James actually took a step back, his eyes wide with disbelief. My father's face contorted with rage and disbelief. That's impossible, he sputtered. That's a lie. No individual shareholder besides myself controls more than 5%. I nodded to Martin Wells, who had moved to the front of the room. On cue, he began distributing sealed envelopes to each board member. What you're receiving, I explained to the board, is documentation of my ownership position, verified by independent auditors and my legal team. You'll find everything is in order, transparent, and in full compliance with all SEC regulations. Walter Grange, the senior board member, had already torn open his envelope and was scanning the contents with growing alarm. These appear to be legitimate, he said slowly, looking up at my father. Robert, did you know about this? My father had moved to grab the documentation from Walter's hands. This is preposterous. Some kind of trick. Alexandra couldn't possibly what? Dad, I interrupted. Understand business strategy? Execute a complex financial transaction? Build something significant without your approval or assistance? I've done all 3. I turned back to the stunned audience. Let me be clear about my intentions. I'm not here to destroy what my father has built. I'm here to save it from increasingly risky decisions that threaten its long-term viability. How dare you? My father growled, finally abandoning pretense. His face flushed with fury. You ungrateful, disloyal. I've never been disloyal to Mitchell Enterprises. I cut in. I've simply been loyal to its future rather than to one man's ego. A commotion at the side of the room drew attention as James unexpectedly moved to stand beside me. She's right about the risks, he said, his voice strained but determined. I've raised concerns about the Apex acquisition and the Singapore expansion multiple times. The projections don't support the level of investment we're making. My father stared at his son in naked disbelief. You're siding with her? After everything I've given you? I'm siding with the company's best interests, James replied quietly. That's what you taught me to do, Dad. Mitchell Enterprises comes first. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. For decades, my father had used the company's interests to justify his personal choices, his treatment of family, his ruthless business tactics. Now those same justifications were being turned against him. Walter Grange stood, his expression grave. In light of these revelations, I believe the board needs to convene immediately to discuss implications. My father attempted to regain control, his voice booming across the ballroom. This is ridiculous. We're in the middle of a celebration. Board matters can be addressed at the appropriate time, through proper channels. With respect, Robert, Walter replied firmly. When a previously unknown shareholder controls nearly a third of the company and raises serious concerns about strategic decisions, that constitutes an emergency worthy of immediate attention. Other board members were nodding in agreement, already gathering their things. The carefully orchestrated celebration was unraveling before my father's eyes. I stepped forward once more, my voice gentler but no less resolute. Dad, this isn't how I wanted this to happen. For years, I tried to contribute, to be heard, to be valued for my actual abilities, rather than measured against your narrow definition of worth. You left me no choice but to prove myself in a way you couldn't ignore. For a moment, something flickered in my father's eyes, a flash of recognition, perhaps even respect, quickly consumed by anger. The board will meet in the Wellington room, Walter announced to the stunned crowd. Robert, Alexandra, James, your presence is required. Everyone else, please enjoy dinner. We apologize for the interruption. As the board members filed out, whispers erupted throughout the ballroom. My mother stood frozen at the edge of the stage, her perfect composure finally shattered. My father stared at me with cold fury before turning to follow the board without another word. James lingered briefly. I can't believe you pulled this off, he murmured, sounding both impressed and unsettled. Do you have any idea what you've done? I nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of the moment. I've changed everything. For better or worse. As we moved to join the emergency board meeting, I caught sight of Martin Wells watching from the sidelines, a hint of vindication in his eyes. 30 years after being pushed out of the company he helped build, he was witnessing a reckoning he'd thought would never come. Are you ready for this? James asked as we approached the Wellington room. I took a deep breath. I've been preparing for 3 years. What I didn't say was that I'd been preparing my entire life for the moment someone in the Mitchell family finally took my father's measure and found him wanting. I just never expected that someone would be me. The Wellington room had been transformed from an elegant private dining space into an impromptu boardroom. Hotel staff hurriedly arranged chairs around a long table as board members filed in, their celebratory mood replaced by tense professionalism. My father positioned himself at the head of the table, a physical claim to authority that no one challenged yet. I took a seat halfway down, with James hesitantly settling beside me. The silence was thick with unspoken questions, as Walter Grange closed the door, shutting out the murmur of confused guests in the main ballroom. I suggest we dispense with formalities, Walter began, taking his seat. This isn't a scheduled board meeting, but given the circumstances, we need clarity immediately. My father seized the opening. Indeed we do. My daughter has made some outrageous claims and disrupted a company celebration with unfounded accusations. My ownership stake is fully documented. I interrupted calmly. As the materials in front of you verify. As for my concerns about the company's strategic direction, the quarterly financials support everything I've stated. Quarterly financials that you shouldn't have access to. My father snapped. Which raises serious questions about corporate espionage and your relationship with Barrett International. I had anticipated this attack. I've never misused my position at Barrett or compromised confidential information. My knowledge of Mitchell Enterprises comes from perfectly legal channels, public filings, industry analysis, and conversations with concerned parties within the company. Concerned parties. My father's eyes narrowed. So, you've been cultivating informants within my company. Our company, I corrected. And I didn't need informants. People talk when they're worried about the future of their careers, especially when leadership dismisses valid concerns about risky business decisions. Board member Elizabeth Winters, who had been silently reviewing the documentation, looked up. These ownership records appear legitimate. Multiple investment vehicles, certainly, but nothing illegal or improper that I can see. The question is, what does Alexandra intend to do with this significant position? All eyes turned to me. This was the moment I'd rehearsed countless times. My intention is straightforward, I stated. Mitchell Enterprises needs a course correction. The company has drifted from the sound business principles that built its success toward increasingly risky ventures, based on my father's instincts rather than data. I want to ensure the company's long-term stability by advocating for more balanced decision-making and proper risk assessment. In other words, my father interjected bitterly. She wants control. After contributing nothing to this company for years, She's attempting a backdoor takeover. If I wanted a takeover, I would have continued quietly acquiring shares until I had majority control. I countered. Instead, I'm revealing my position now, specifically to prevent further damage from decisions like the Apex acquisition. James unexpectedly spoke up. The Apex integration is problematic. The financial projections we were shown before purchase haven't materialized. We're seeing 30% higher costs and 40% lower revenue than forecasted. My father turned on him, betrayal etched across his features. You're supporting this ambush? After I just announced your promotion to president, I'm supporting an honest assessment of our current situation, James replied, his voice steady despite his obvious discomfort. Dad, you overruled the entire risk management team on Apex. You dismissed the integration challenges as details to be sorted out later. Those details are now costing us millions each quarter. Other board members were nodding, their expressions shifting from shock to concern. My father changed tactics, his voice taking on the reasonable tone he used to neutralize opposition. Every major acquisition has integration challenges. Visionary leadership means seeing beyond temporary setbacks to the long-term strategic advantages. The board approved Apex because they understood this principle. The board approved Apex based on projections that were, at best, overly optimistic. I countered. And similar patterns appear in the Singapore expansion and the projected Liberty contract renewal. Walter Grange leaned forward. Alexandra, what exactly are you proposing? First, immediate reassessment of the Apex situation with realistic projections and a clear mitigation strategy. Second, pause on the Singapore expansion until proper risk assessment is completed. Third, a more conservative approach to future acquisitions, with greater board oversight on major decisions. And your role in this? Elizabeth asked. I'm requesting a seat on the board, commensurate with my ownership position, to provide an alternative perspective on strategic decisions. My father erupted. This is absurd. She has no experience with our industry, from an executive perspective. Her career at Barrett hardly qualifies her to direct Mitchell Enterprises' strategy. Actually, board member David Chen interjected, studying his tablet. Alexandra's team at Barrett has outperformed our comparable division for 3 consecutive years. Their market share has increased while maintaining better margins than we've achieved. My father's face reddened. That's completely different. Is it? David looked up. Because from where I sit, it seems like Alexandra has demonstrated exactly the kind of balanced growth strategy she's advocating we adopt. The mood in the room was shifting palpably. Board members were exchanging glances, reassessing the situation and me in real time. My father made one last desperate attempt. This is still my company. I hold the majority stake. I've built Mitchell Enterprises from nothing into what it is today, and I won't have my own daughter trying to dictate how it should be run when she hasn't earned the right. Dad, I said quietly, this isn't about earning rights or proving loyalty. It's about acknowledging reality. The company is over-leveraged. The Apex acquisition is failing. The Singapore expansion violates our own risk parameters. And your reaction to these facts being pointed out proves exactly why the board needs more balanced input. The room fell silent. For perhaps the first time in his career, Robert Mitchell found himself without allies or leverage, faced with documented facts he couldn't spin, and a challenge from the last person had ever considered a worthy opponent. Walter Grange cleared his throat. I propose we take a short recess to consider these matters individually, then reconvene to determine next steps. As board members filed out for the 15-minute break, my father remained seated, staring at the documents spread before him. James hesitated, then followed the board members out, leaving just my father and me in the Wellington room. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, without looking up, my father asked, "Why?" The simplicity of the question caught me off guard. "Because you left me no choice," I answered honestly. "You were never going to see my value unless I forced you to." He finally looked up, his expression a complex mixture of anger, disbelief, and something that almost resembled respect. "You've been planning this for years, 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. I confirmed, since I learned the company was heading in a dangerous direction under your leadership, and you couldn't have come to me directly? Father to daughter?" I laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "When has that ever worked, Dad? When have you ever truly listened to me? Tonight, you publicly called me your useless daughter in front of hundreds of people. That's how little respect you have for me, even now." Something flickered in his eyes, not quite regret, but perhaps recognition. You really think you know better than me how to run my company? I think no single person should have unchecked power to make decisions that affect thousands of employees and shareholders. I replied, even you. The door opened as the board members began returning. My father straightened in his chair, the momentary vulnerability vanishing behind his usual mask of authority. The next 2 hours were intense. Reports were pulled up on tablets, financial projections analyzed, risk assessments reviewed. With each revelation, the board's concern visibly grew. The apex problems were worse than most had realized. The Singapore expansion risks were clearly documented in reports that had somehow never made it to board level. Through it all, my father fought to maintain control, alternately minimizing problems and promising swift corrections, attacking my credibility, and then acknowledging minor issues that were being addressed. But with each exchange, his position weakened. The turning point came when James, reluctantly but firmly, confirmed that he had raised concerns about these same issues multiple times, only to be overruled. I believed in Dad's vision, he admitted, but the numbers don't support the current strategy. We need a course correction. By midnight, the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. The board voted unanimously to appoint me as a director, effective immediately. They established an emergency committee to reassess the apex situation and paused the Singapore expansion pending further review. My father, outmaneuvered but not defeated, managed one final power play. As chairman and majority shareholder, I retain final authority on strategic direction, he reminded everyone. I will take the board's recommendations under advisement. Walter Grange's response was diplomatically devastating. Of course, Robert, and we, as fiduciaries responsible to all shareholders, will exercise our duty of oversight accordingly. Alexandra's appointment ensures the board has complete information moving forward. The implication was clear. The era of Robert Mitchell's unchecked authority was over. As the emergency meeting concluded, my father rose without looking at me, his posture rigid with controlled fury. The board members filtered out, leaving just James and me in the Wellington room. Well, my brother said, after a long silence, that definitely wasn't the celebration Dad had planned. Despite everything, I laughed, a release of 3 years of tension. No, I suppose not. James studied me with new eyes. You know he's going to fight back. This isn't over. I know. I nodded. But the company will be better for it, and maybe, eventually, so will our family. As I gathered my papers to leave, I realized that tonight's victory wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of a new chapter for Mitchell Enterprises, and for the Mitchell family. The real work of rebuilding both was just beginning. The Monday after the gala, I arrived at Mitchell Enterprises headquarters for my first official board meeting. The security guard did a double take as I presented my newly issued credentials, clearly not having received the memo about my appointment. The whispers and stares followed me through the lobby, across the executive floor, and into the boardroom where the other directors were already assembling. My father arrived last, deliberately taking his time to greet each board member individually, before acknowledging me with the barest nod. He took his position at the head of the table, his expression neutral, but his eyes glacial. Before we begin, he announced, I want to make something clear. While recent developments have created certain changes to our governance structure, the fundamental direction of Mitchell Enterprises remains under my leadership as majority shareholder and chairman. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room before settling coldly on me. Alternative perspectives will be noted, but my vision for this company has built 3 decades of success. That vision will continue to guide us forward. It was a declaration of war disguised as a chairman's opening remarks. The following weeks established a pattern that would become familiar. In every meeting, on every decision, my father opposed my input on principle. If I suggested caution, he pushed for aggression. If I advocated for a particular strategic direction, he immediately found flaws with the approach. The Cold War between us played out in boardroom votes, email exchanges, and tense executive meetings. What surprised me was James' response. Rather than aligning automatically with our father as he had throughout his career, my brother began evaluating issues independently, sometimes siding with my perspective, sometimes with our father's, but always based on his own analysis rather than loyalty. This infuriated our father even more than my opposition, as it represented a second betrayal from the child he had groomed as his loyal successor. The apex situation proved to be the first major test of the new power dynamic. The emergency committee I chaired delivered a sobering assessment. The acquisition had been fundamentally overvalued, its integration systematically mismanaged, and its projected performance wildly optimistic. "We have two options," I presented to the board. "Continue pouring resources into a failing integration, while hiding the problems from shareholders, or acknowledge the issues, implement a strategic restructuring, and take the short-term hit to demonstrate responsible management. Option 1 maintains market confidence and gives us time to correct course privately," my father countered. "Option 2 creates unnecessary panic and undermines our position with investors." The debate was heated, but ultimately, with James' support, the board voted for transparency and restructuring. When the decision was announced, Mitchell Enterprises stock dropped 12% in a single day. My father made sure every employee knew exactly who to blame. "Alexandra Mitchell's first major contribution to the company," he remarked loudly as we passed in the hallway, "wiping out millions in shareholder value in 24 hours. Congratulations." What he didn't acknowledge was that 2 weeks later, as our restructuring plan demonstrated responsible leadership, the stock had recovered 8 of those 12 points. Analysts began cautiously upgrading their outlook on Mitchell Enterprises, citing improved governance and strategic realignment. The Singapore expansion provided the second major confrontation. After a thorough risk assessment, I proposed a phased approach, rather than the all-at-once market entry my father had planned. "Half measures achieve half results," he dismissed during the strategy meeting. Mitchell Enterprises didn't become an industry leader through timidity. Mitchell Enterprises became an industry leader through calculated risks, not recklessness. I countered. "The market conditions have changed since this expansion was first conceived. Our approach should adapt accordingly." To everyone's surprise, James presented a compromise. A modified entry strategy that preserved the expansion's core objectives while mitigating the most serious risks. It was a brilliant solution that gave both my father and me a partial win, while prioritizing the company's interests above either of our egos. The board approved unanimously. That evening, I received my first text from James that wasn't strictly business-related in years. "We actually make a decent team when we're not being pitted against each other." 3 months after the gala, we faced our first major crisis under the new governance structure. The Liberty contract, our second-largest client relationship, announced they were considering competitive bids for the first time in 15 years. The potential revenue loss would be devastating. My father immediately blamed my interference with company strategy. "Clients sense instability," he argued in an emergency session. "Alexandra's power play has created exactly the vulnerability our competitors are exploiting." Instead of engaging in this blame game, I requested a meeting with Liberty's executive team not as a Mitchell Enterprises board member, but in my capacity at Barrett International, where I had developed a relationship with their CFO through industry events. "You're going to use your position with our competitor to intervene?" my father asked incredulously when I proposed this approach. "I'm going to use every legitimate connection at my disposal to save a critical client relationship," I corrected. "Unless you'd prefer I stand aside while Liberty walks away." The meeting revealed what we should have recognized months earlier. Liberty wasn't leaving because of governance changes or perceived instability. They were leaving because our service quality had declined while our pricing had increased, a combination my father had implemented to improve short-term margins at the expense of client satisfaction. Armed with this insight, James and I developed a client retention strategy that addressed Liberty's specific concerns without sacrificing long-term profitability. When we presented it to my father, I expected immediate rejection. Instead, after reviewing our proposal in silence, he looked up with an expression I couldn't quite read. "This approach has merit," he said finally. "Implemented immediately." It was the first time my father had ever acknowledged one of my ideas as valuable. The moment was so unexpected that I almost missed its significance, until James raised his eyebrows at me across the table. Liberty renewed their contract the following month, with a 5-year commitment that exceeded our previous arrangement. The news reverberated through the company, stabilizing our stock price and quieting internal rumors about the Mitchell family power struggle. That weekend, my mother called, inviting me to Sunday dinner, our traditional family gathering that had been conspicuously not invited to since the gala confrontation. "Your father suggested you might want to join us," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "He mentioned the Liberty contract renewal." I almost declined out of habit, a protective reflex against the criticism and dismissal I'd come to expect at these dinners. Then I recognized the olive branch for what it was: awkward and insufficient, but a beginning. The dinner was tense but civil. My father discussed business more than personal matters, but he asked about my perspectives rather than dismissing them out of hand. My mother seemed relieved by the détente, while James appeared to be enjoying the novel experience of a family dinner without underlying hostility. As we finished dessert, my father cleared his throat. The Liberty strategy was well executed, he said, addressing his coffee cup more than me. Their renewal terms exceeded projections. From Robert Mitchell, this qualified as effusive praise. It was a team effort, I replied carefully. Jameis' implementation was key to its success. My father nodded, then added something I never expected to hear. You identified the core issue correctly. I had been prioritizing margins over client satisfaction. It was an oversight on my part. The admission of any error, however obliquely phrased, was unprecedented. My mother actually dropped her spoon in surprise. That dinner marked a turning point in our family dynamic. The Cold War didn't end overnight. My father was constitutionally incapable of surrendering power or authority gracefully, but a new pattern of grudging professional respect began to emerge. 6 months after the gala, Mitchell Enterprises announced record profitability for the quarter, driven largely by the restructuring initiatives James and I had championed. The Apex problems had been addressed transparently. The Singapore expansion was proceeding on a more sustainable timeline, and client retention had improved significantly. My father, James, and I found ourselves in my father's office, reviewing plans for a new project, a strategic partnership with an emerging technology firm that complemented our core business. For the first time, we were working as colleagues rather than adversaries, each contributing from our areas of strength. We should incorporate Alexandra's risk assessment model, my father said, surprising both James and me. It identified vulnerabilities in the Apex deal that our standard process missed. And Jameis' integration framework, I added. It's more effective than anything we had previously. My father looked between us, something like pride flashing briefly in his eyes before his usual reserve returned. Mitchell Enterprises is stronger with both of you, contributing your unique perspectives, he admitted. The company benefits from the balance. It wasn't an apology for years of dismissal and criticism. It wasn't an acknowledgement of the pain Head caused or the talents Head ignored. But it was recognition, however limited, that I had value that I always had. Later, as James and I walked to the parking garage, he nudged my shoulder lightly. You know what that was back there, right? That was Dad's version of saying you were right. I smiled. And that he was wrong. Don't forget that part. Historical moment. James agreed. We should have recorded it. We laughed together, the tension of decades easing incrementally with each small step forward. Our family would never be perfect, the damage ran too deep, the habits too ingrained, but we were finding a new equilibrium based on mutual respect, rather than power and submission. As for Mitchell Enterprises, the company continued to evolve under our shared leadership, more balanced, more resilient, and ultimately more successful than it had been under my father's unchecked authority. The useless daughter had become an essential voice in its future, proving that sometimes the only way to heal a broken family is to break the dynamics that damaged it in the first place. If you've ever had to stand up to someone who underestimated you, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. How did you prove your worth when others couldn't see it? Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories of standing your ground, and share with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes the people who dismiss you are the ones who need your perspective the most. Thank you for listening to my journey from useless daughter to respected businesswoman. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is refuse to accept the limitations others place on us.